When your own child chooses a stranger over you, would you walk away or rise from the ashes? Subscribe for more tales of vengeance that burn slow and end sharp. The scent of roses clung to the Texas dusk as the violins played under the oak tree. Lila Monroe watched her only son, Carter, straighten his tie at the altar. He looked so much like his father, steady, proud, full of promise. The crowd sighed when the bride appeared. Sloane Porter glided down the aisle like she owned the light, white silk, flawless smile, the kind of woman who made everyone forget who built the ground beneath her heels. Lila didn't blink. She just touched the silver locket that held the keys to her ranch, the land her late husband swore would stay in their blood. When the I-do's echoed, she whispered, "So do I," as if she too had made a vow to endure. But endurance has limits. Later, under the fairy lights and fiddle music, the guests danced. Lila sat at the edge of it all, her royal blue dress glowing softly in the lantern light. Sloane whispered to Carter. His smile faltered. Then he walked straight to his mother. "Mom," he said tightly, "Sloane thinks your dress is distracting." Lila blinked. "It's the same one I wore to your father's memorial. She says it's too bright." Maybe you should head home early." The music died. Forks stopped, eyes turned. "You're asking your mother to leave your wedding?" she said softly. Carter's jaw locked. Sloane appeared beside him, resting a possessive hand on his arm. Her diamond caught the light like a blade. "Please, Mom," he whispered. Lila stood slowly, her smile unbroken. "Of course, darling." She walked through the murmuring crowd, gravel crunching under her heels. No one stopped her. Not one soul. At the car, thunder rolled in the distance. Lila touched the keys around her neck and whispered to the dark, "Let them try to take what's mine." The first raindrops fell as she drove away, each one tapping against the windshield like a countdown. By dawn, Silver Creek Ranch shimmered under the mist. Her husband's voice echoed in her mind. "If the world turns its back on you, remember, the land never will." She stepped onto the porch, eyes burning not with tears, but resolve. Sloane had charmed her son, but charm had a way of rotting when tested. The war hadn't started yet. But Lila could already smell the smoke. Days passed. Carter visited less. When he did, Sloane was glued to his side, all perfume and polite poison. She spoke in words that didn't belong on a ranch: branding, market value, modernizing. The first sign came in whispers. A zoning request filed under Carter's name. Lila drove into town, heart pounding. The clerk's screen confirmed it. East Pasture, zoning change request, co-owner Carter Monroe. Her voice cracked. "Filed by who?" "Co-owner," the clerk said. "Sloane Porter Monroe." That night, the storm returned. Lila called Claudine, her neighbor, her oldest friend, and the sharpest retired attorney this side of Houston. "She's moving under your nose," Claudine said flatly. "Check the county register tomorrow." Lila didn't sleep. She sat at the piano, playing the hymn she'd played at her husband's funeral, every note a warning. Every silence, a plan forming. The next morning, she found her husband's old study ransacked. The copy of his will, gone. In its place, a silver USB drive. One file inside, draft sale agreement, Silver Creek East section. The buyer's name read, Sloane Porter Holdings, LLC. Her pulse turned to fire. The woman who'd just called her mom in front of 200 guests was planning to steal her land. The rain began again. She printed the contract, the pages sliding out of the machine like confessions. She called Claudine. "She's buying the ranch through her own company," Lila whispered. "Send me the file." Minutes later, Claudine called back, voice clipped. "That company's real. Registered 2 months before the wedding, principal owner, Sloane Porter." Lila closed her eyes. She planned this before the vows. "She's clever," Claudine said, "but not clever enough to beat a woman who's already buried her husband and built an empire with her bare hands." "You ready to fight smart?" Lila's voice steadied. "Smarter than she's ever dreamed." Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, lighting the barn and the restless horses within. Lila stared into the dark. "The land remembers," she whispered. And so did she. The house smelled like rosemary and slow-baked peace, but Lila knew better. That night wasn't about forgiveness. It was about revelation. She set the table with her best china, polished the silver until it gleamed like warning lights, and poured wine that tasted like old storms. Across from her sat an empty chair, the one that had belonged to her husband. The other 2 seats were for the traitors she'd raised and welcomed. At exactly 7, headlights flashed against the window. Carter's truck rolled up first. Sloane's white SUV followed, perfect and smug. "Mom," Carter said, stepping in, trying for casual. He looked tired, like a man trying to balance 2 lives with 1 soul. Sloane followed, radiant and artificial in a fitted cream dress. "Marjorie," she said, smiling like a knife, "what a lovely evening." "Thank you for coming," Lila replied, her voice warm honey over steel. "It's time we all talk, just family." Sloane's eyes glinted. "Of course. Family is everything." Dinner began with small talk that tasted like poison. Carter rambled about business expansions. Sloane nodded, sprinkling buzzwords like salt investors, branding, growth. Lila smiled and listened to every lie, the ticking clock counting down to the moment she'd light the fuse. "So," Carter began, nervously adjusting his fork, "maybe you'll reconsider the Silver Creek Events project. The investors are serious." "It's a great opportunity." "I'm not ready to turn my husband's land into a photo booth," Lila said evenly. "This ranch isn't for sale." Sloane tilted her head. "But homes can be profitable too. We're just trying to modernize." Lila's smile deepened. "Speaking of modern things, I found a file on my computer." Carter froze mid-bite. "What file?" "A draft sale agreement." It mentioned the East pasture. His fork hit the plate. "Mom, that must have been—" "I read it," she said gently. "Every word." Sloane didn't blink. "You probably misclicked." "Technology can be confusing at your age." The insult hung in the air like smoke. Carter looked between them, uneasy. "Sloane." She pressed her hand to his arm, voice syrupy sweet. "She's misunderstood, darling. The file was mislabeled, that's all." "Then you can explain," Lila said softly, "why the buyer listed is Sloane Porter Holdings, LLC. The words landed like gunfire. Carter's face drained of color. Before Sloane could recover, the door to the study creaked open. Heels clicked on hardwood. Claudine stepped into the dining room, trench coat sharp, eyes sharper. She carried a folder under her arm like a loaded weapon. "Funny thing," Claudine said smoothly, laying documents on the table. "I checked the corporate registry myself. Your company doesn't handle various projects. It handles one acquiring properties through marriages." Sloane stiffened, mask cracking. "What are you doing here?" "I invited her," Lila said calmly. Claudine flipped open the folder. "You should have used a better alias, sweetheart. Public records are a terrible place to hide sins." Carter stood, voice shaking. "Sloane, tell me this isn't true." Sloane laughed weakly. "Oh, for God's sake, Carter. Your mother's paranoid. She's hated me since day one." "That's not an answer," he snapped. Her eyes sharpened, the mask slipping. "You wanted progress." "I made it happen. I took initiative." Lila's tone turned to ice. "By erasing your husband's family from their own land?" Sloane shoved her chair back, tears glistening like stage props. "I can't sit here and be insulted in my own family." "If you love me, Carter, you'll stop this." He flinched, torn in half. Lila didn't move. "No, son. Love isn't obedience. It's clarity." Sloane stormed out, heels hitting the wood like gunshots. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Carter stood trembling in the echo. "This dinner," he said hoarsely, "was a setup." "No," Lila whispered. It was the truth catching up. The silence that followed was thick as thunderclouds. Claudine reached over, snuffing out one candle. "Well," she murmured, That went about as expected. Outside, the wind began to rise again, the kind that carries warnings. Lila looked toward the storm and said quietly, "She'll come back, but next time she won't knock." She was right. 3 days later, the rain came hard. Claudine arrived, drenched, clutching a folder. "You'd better sit down," she said, breathless. Inside were new documents. Lila's blood ran cold when she saw the name under co-owner, David Monroe, her late husband's cousin, the same man who'd once called her sentimental for refusing to sell. "He's her partner," Claudine said grimly, "financing her company. She's the face, he's the money." Lila stared at the paper, the ink trembling in her hands. "He's finishing what he started 20 years ago. And using your son to do it," Claudine added. "We have to move careful. If you rush, she'll twist the story." "She already has," Lila whispered. "But I'm done reacting. I'll make her show her hand." That night, the storm howled through the ranch, rattling windows and stirring ghosts. Lila sat by the fire, her husband's portrait flickering above the mantel. "You told me the land would protect me," she whispered. "Now it's my turn to protect it." When the lightning cracked, she smiled at its reflection in the window. It was the same light that burned in her chest. The next morning, she woke with purpose. The piano in the living room gleamed, untouched since the wedding. She pressed one key, then another, until the melody of resolve filled the room. It wasn't sorrow anymore. It was a declaration, because when a woman loses everything, she doesn't crumble. She sharpens. The air at Silver Creek was different that morning, too still, like the world holding its breath before something holy or catastrophic. The great room glowed with sunlight as Lila set the stage. At one end of the long table sat Darius Cole, the young lawyer Claudine had brought in, sharp as a blade, but calm as a preacher. At the other end, Sloane, perfect hair, perfect lie, and Carter, hollow-eyed beside her. Claudine and Reverend Miles flanked Lila like sentinels of truth. 2 men from the bank sat in the corner, pens ready, faces pale with curiosity. It looked civil. It wasn't. Sloane crossed her legs and spoke first, voice soft enough to fool the untrained. "Before we begin, I want to make clear that this is simply a business transition. Carter and I have agreed it's time to modernize Silver Creek. Isn't that right, darling?" Carter nodded automatically, not meeting his mother's eyes. Lila didn't move. Her face was marble, her silence the sharpest weapon in the room. Sloane slid a folder across the table. Authorization for the sale of the East Pasture. Signed and notarized. Darius flipped through it. His calm expression didn't waver, though the air seemed to tighten around him. He turned the papers toward Lila. The signature line read, "Carter Monroe." But Lila knew her son's handwriting the way a mother knows her child's heartbeat. It wasn't his. Sloane smiled, confident. "Everything's in order." "Just waiting for bank acknowledgement." Claudine's lips curved slightly. "Not quite." Darius stood, buttoning his jacket like a man about to deliver scripture. "Before authorizing any transfer, we submitted the document for handwriting verification." He laid out the report, crisp and damning. The expert concluded the signature was forged. The word dropped like thunder. Carter's chair scraped the floor. "Forged?" "That's impossible. I didn't." Sloane's voice sharpened. "This is absurd." "Anyone can fake a report." Claudine stepped forward and placed a small voice recorder on the table. "Then maybe you can explain this." She pressed play. Static hissed, then Sloane's voice filled the room. Cold, certain, unmistakable. "Once she's in the nursing home, we'll finalize the sale. Carter won't object. He still believes he's in charge." A pause. Then a man's drawl. "David Monroe." "Good. By the time the old woman realizes, the land will already be mine." The silence that followed was violent. Even the horses outside went quiet. Carter's face drained of color. "Sloane, what is that?" "It's fake," she whispered, panic creeping in. "They're framing me." Darius's tone was calm, almost kind. It's authenticated, time-stamped, and verified by law enforcement. Sloane's mask cracked completely. You set me up. Claudine leaned forward, eyes sharp as glass. No, dear, you set yourself up. We just pressed record. Carter's voice broke. All this time you lied to me. You used me to steal from my own family. Sloane reached for him, desperate. Carter, please, everything I did was for us. He stepped back. There is no us. Not one built on ashes. The banker cleared his throat nervously. Given this evidence, all transactions are suspended. Accounts under Sloane Porter Holdings are frozen pending investigation. Darius nodded. The IRS already has the file. I suspect they'll take it from here. Sloane's composure collapsed. You can't do this. This is my life. No, Lila said softly, rising to her feet. It was my husband's, my son's, my family's. You only rented it with lies. Sloane turned to Carter, pleading. Tell them you still love me. But Carter couldn't even meet her eyes. He covered his face, trembling. Sloane's scream ripped through the room. Then she was gone, heels pounding down the hallway, the front door slamming so hard the glass rattled. Silence fell. Reverend Miles finally spoke. The good book says, be sure your sin will find you out. I believe we've just witnessed the proof. Claudine exhaled, almost smiling. Justice by truth. Carter's voice trembled. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. Lila reached across the table, touching his hand. You didn't have to see it, son. You just have to learn from it. Outside, the wind picked up again, but it wasn't angry anymore. It sounded like release. 2 months later, Silver Creek was whole again. The news had run its course. Houston woman accused of fraud and embezzlement. Partner indicted in land scheme. David Monroe was facing trial. Sloane had vanished like a ghost who'd lost her stage. The morning Carter returned. Fog rolled low over the fields. Lila was feeding the horses when she heard his truck pull up. He stepped out. No suit, no slick shoes, just jeans and the weight of guilt. Mom, he said quietly. She didn't turn. Carter, he looked down. You were right, about everything. I thought I was building a future, but I was destroying the past. Lila's voice was steady. Sometimes, son, we build on sand and call it home. But the storm always knows the truth. He swallowed hard. Can you ever forgive me? She met his eyes. Forgiveness isn't the issue. Trust is. He hesitated. What does that mean? Lila touched the locket around her neck, the same one that held the ranch keys. It means some doors stay locked. He blinked, trying to understand. Not out of hate, she said softly. Out of wisdom. He nodded slowly. I understand. No, she replied gently, but one day you will. That night, Claudine and Reverend Miles sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea as fireflies floated through the dusk. They watched Lila in the distance, brushing her mare under the orange sky. She looks lighter, the Reverend said. That's because she already made peace, Claudine replied, long before any of this started. He frowned. What do you mean? She knew, Miles. About the company, the fake contract, even the missing will. She planted it. She wanted them to reveal themselves. The Reverend's eyes widened. She set her own trap. She didn't trap them, Claudine said quietly. She just gave them enough rope to hang themselves. They sat in silence as cicadas sang. Finally, he whispered, then she didn't just protect the land, she purified it. At dawn, Lila saddled her chestnut mare, Seraphine. The sky glowed gold as she rode out into the open pasture. The field stretched wide and endless, washed clean by justice and morning dew. The keys around her neck caught the sun. She whispered to the wind, some doors stay locked, and that's how the light gets in. Her laughter carried across the hills, strong, free, unafraid. Because the storm was over. And she was still standing. If you were in Lila's place, would you forgive or let karma ride? Subscribe and tell me in the comments below.